Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Transfer Express webinar. Hello, everyone. There we go. I see some people in the chat box. Okay, so you can all hear me clearly then. My name is Andy Curtis. I am the Senior Manager of Dealer Services, Graphic and Commercial Design here at Transfer Express. And it is my pleasure to bring you apparel fabric types and what transfer to use on each. This is an absolutely fun topic if you are a heat press nerd like myself. This is a fun topic. I've been with Transfer Express a long, long time, and it's funny for me because 15 years ago, people were pressing on cotton and 50/50 and polyester, and that was about it. If you could find a transfer that worked on nylon 15 years ago, you were really in the money. So it's funny because today there's so many garment types out there, guys. So many garment types, and it's hard to keep them all straight, right? It's hard to remember what goes on what and what transfer type goes on what and what in the world these words mean. When you look at a tag and you go, I don't even know what that is. What is that? Um, the goal here today is to share a little bit of information here. Now, if you have joined me before, then welcome back. If you have not joined me before, then here's how it goes, guys. We are recording this webinar, and it is going to be posted at transferexpress.com/webinars after the fact, in the next day or two after we're done here. Good sense of humor, Freddie. For what is cotton? That's a long answer, Freddie. Um, so we're going to post the recording of this webinar after the fact. It'll be on the website. As we go about the webinar, if you have questions, please type them into the chat box that everybody has found there at the bottom. Ask any questions that you can think of. I will do my best to answer them. If you've joined me before, you know that I love talking, and I talk a lot. So I will try to answer all of your questions. If I miss one, sometimes I get on such a tangent, I may miss one of your questions. I have a helper behind the curtain who is going to be answering those questions for me, the ones that I miss. Sometimes we may answer the same question at the same time, so bear with us. And we will do our best to get all the information we can possibly get to you. So will lunch be provided? Sorry, Cody, it's not that kind of class. Hopefully what's going to happen here is if you are an old pro, I'm going to give you some interesting information. If you're brand new to the industry, I am going to fill your head with so much fabric knowledge, it is going to be almost painful. So there's a lot of information here. I've actually encouraged you all to hit the recording on our website afterwards because we are going to go through a lot of information here. And I have a sneaky suspicion we're going to go right up to the 45-minute mark, maybe even hour mark. We'll see. I don't know. We shall see how it goes. All right. I'm going to start us off with a little bit of trivia because I'm curious to see how much you guys know. Does anybody out there in listening land, know what the difference between a knit fabric and a woven fabric is? Anybody know? What is a knit? What is a weave? What's the difference? Julie and Michael do. Okay. No, Freddie? This is one of those things that they come up all the time when you guys are looking at garments, and it doesn't matter where. You could be looking at Broder or Sanmar or God knows where. You'll see terms like knit and weave, and the question is, well, okay, what's a knit and what's a weave? So it seems to be split pretty well down the middle. How do you like that? Okay. So some people do, some people don't. All right. So for those of you who don't know, the 10,000-foot view, the easy answer to this question, and I'm sure we could get into more detail, but I'll just answer it easily here. A knit refers to a garment that has been knitted together with a single yarn of fabric. There's one strand of fabric being knit together, to where a weave is where you're taking multiple yarns, multiple strands of fabric being woven together all at once. Now, this is pertinent to the conversation today because a lot of, oh, there you go. John's got a real good answer there, woven on a loom. Um, this is very pertinent to the conversation today because you're going to see a lot of fabric types that we tend to think of as its own fabric. One of the examples, and we've had this type of presentation before, and one of the things that tend to surprise people, a fabric like chiffon, let's say. Chiffon is not actually its own magical type of fabric. Chiffon is actually woven out of cotton or polyester. Well, not really cotton, usually polyester or silk. So chiffon is not actually a separate kind of fabric. Chiffon is actually the name of the weave. It's actually a kind of weave. It's a technique using to wove those fibers together to make chiffon. So we're going to talk about this throughout the webinar today, um, where there's going to be certain fabrics that we talk about here where it's not really actually a separate type of fabric. It's actually a weave. But we'll discuss that as we go. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So without further ado, let's talk about what exactly we're going to be covering today first, right? Um, so we're going to be covering the material to use on the different apparel. So this is one of those big things. When you're new to the industry, at trade shows or phone calls here at our call center at Transfer Express, one of the first things that new people ask us is, well, how do I figure out which transfer type to use? The big secret is it's all about the garment. It's all about the garment. The garment you're using will dictate what type of transfer you should use, right? So if you're using just a plain cotton t-shirt, okay, well, your options are endless. But if you're using a Kona t-shirt, ooh, Kona, suddenly the question becomes, well, what works on Kona? Can I use the same thing I use on Kona that I use on cotton? What's the difference? So garment or fabric? This is actually a good point, Jean. Jean's actually brought up a good point here. She says garment or fabric. To be honest with you, Jean, I have a terrible habit of using those words interchangeably, but it's a bad habit of mine. It's all about the fabric. It's all about the type of fabric. So the question is, oh, I have a T-shirt. That's one of those answers that we get a lot on the phones here at Transfer Express when we ask somebody, "What are you using?" "Well, I'm using a T-shirt." Okay, well that's great, but what is the fabric of the T-shirt made out of? We're going to answer that question a little bit, Lisa. But the question is, what is that t-shirt made out of? Is the t-shirt made out of cotton? Is it made out of polyester? Is it 50-50? What is the fabric? The fabric is what's going to dictate what transfer type to use. So during this webinar, we're going to discuss all these different types of materials. We're going to talk about the apparel. We're going to talk about the recommended transfer type. I am also a history nerd, so I'm going to throw out all kinds of little interesting tidbits to you all, trying to make this interesting for everybody. Again, if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to shout them out, and myself or my helper behind the curtain will be answering them. So let's go ahead and without any further ado, let's kick it off. We're going to go alphabetical with this today. We are looking at acrylic. And before we talk about the acrylic, what I actually want to throw out there to everybody is that you're going to notice these model numbers. So if you look at the hat and the vest here on my page, you'll notice I have these model numbers underneath them, STC20, SW301. These are the model numbers that correspond back with our Transfer Express apparel line that you can purchase from our website. So if you're looking at anything that we're talking about today, you're like, oh, I would love to try that. The model numbers correspond with that fabric, that item on Transfer Express apparel. So FYI, that STC20 refers to the acrylic hat, and you can purchase that acrylic hat on the Transfer Express apparel section. So FYI. All right, so let's talk about acrylic. Acrylic is one of those fun fibers that is synthetic, means it's not naturally occurring in nature. Acrylic is referred to as a thermoplastic. So technically, yes, on some level, deep down on that molecular level, acrylic is a plastic. But acrylic is a synthetic fiber. It's very inexpensive. Acrylic is one of those things that was made in the 1920s, 1930s, and as time went by and it was discovered how cheap it was to manufacture acrylic, it really caught on. Here's the hitch with acrylic, though. You find acrylic generally used in accent stuff, so hats, vests. You don't tend to find too many garments that are full-blown acrylic. And if you do, it tends to be something like an acrylic sweater. Um, and if when you do find like a full-blown acrylic sweater, it's usually the type of fabric, the type of garment that's not really meant to be embellished per se. They're usually very loose weaves. So we tend to decorate more the acrylic hats, the acrylic vests, and the acrylic accessory stuff. But here's the hitch. It is heat sensitive. Acrylic is heat sensitive. So the funny thing about acrylic is that it actually has two stages of heat decomposition. Acrylic will start to break down at one temperature and then melt at another temperature. There we go, John. Yes, a melted glob of goo. I'm not sure goo is the scientific term, John, but you got it. If you hit acrylic with too much heat, it does eventually melt. If you start to get too close to the melting temperature, it starts to decompose. So what'll happen is the fibers will stay intact, sort of, kind of, but they start to turn shiny. They start to bond together with one another. If you heat press an acrylic garment that is just a little too hot, but not hot enough to melt it, what you'll actually find is you're almost like compressing it. You're sort of making it thinner and shinier is what's happening. Now the catch is there are different manufacturers of acrylic fabric. So I can't tell you that there is a point blank always melting temperature of such and such degrees. This is one of those where you have to use one of our less less hot transfers, one of our lower applying transfers. So the list of lower applying transfers you would want to use for acrylic is the ElastiPrints or the AquaTrue if you're looking for screen print. The ElastiPrints is our regular plastisol screen printing. The AquaTrue is our water-based screen printing. If you're a digital kind of guy, you'd want to go with the Stretch Litho, the Express Matte 250, or the Soft Opaque. So those are the 5 lower applying transfers. And again, my suggestion here is before you do acrylic, if you have somebody who wants to press on some acrylic beanies like the one you see in the picture here, it's always a good idea if you've never done it before. Everybody's heat press is different, so you want to order one of those if possible, or if you've got one sitting around, you always want to test one ahead of time. Especially when you're new to something, or if you're going to order a bunch of these beanies, if you've got to do an order of, let's say, 20 of them, order 23-ish. Give yourself a couple extra to play with your very first time so you can understand what your press is going to do to it. Remember, everybody's press is a little different. If you have a Hottronics, those are going to run true to temperature. If you've got an M press or a George Knight or a Hicks or one of those, they tend to run a little bit differently. So you want to mess around with your press and you want to mess around with that fabric just a little bit before you really start committing. So, so acrylic, you're totally able to decorate on, but you just want to make sure you stick to those low temperature applications. Now, the good news with acrylic is you will know immediately if you have heated it too much. Again, acrylic will look shiny and it will compress. So if you were to press like a corner of that acrylic vest the gentleman is wearing there, if you were to press a corner of it, you would notice that corner would become super duper shiny compared to the rest of the vest. And you would notice that that corner, it looks compressed, like it's less fluffy than the rest of the vest. And it's not going to pop back. You could wash that sucker and it's going to stay shiny and compressed. So you got to be careful with acrylic in that regard. But hey, it is a very cost-effective fabric. That's the benefit. Acrylic tends to be pretty cheap. All right, next, bamboo. Bamboo. So the funny thing about bamboo is if we had done, or actually when we did this webinar for the very first time many years ago, we asked who's used bamboo, and I got virtually nobody saying they had. I bet you $1 that if I ask you all right now who's used a bamboo fabric before, I'm going to bet that most of you guys are going to tell me that you have. Bamboo's a lot more common. Now, here's the history lesson. For those of you who don't remember, about 10-ish years ago, and forgive me, I don't remember the exact year, but about 10-ish, 11, 12 years ago, there was a cotton shortage. There had been a problem with cotton manufacturers. There's a cotton shortage, and the garment industry found itself in a position where a lot of garment manufacturers had to find ways to manufacture T-shirts with little to no cotton at a very cost-effective price point. Anyone else remember that? Am I the only one that remembers that? So bamboo became a thing at that point in time. Bamboo, that's when it sort of hit its stride. Bamboo garments have been around for a long time, obviously, but at that point during the cotton shortage is when a lot of manufacturers realized, hey, we can do this with bamboo, and it's not too much more expensive in terms of the actual production process. So with that being said, bamboo is a naturally occurring fiber. Bamboo is a plant, after all. It is very soft. And the funny thing about bamboo, um, oh, Julie, yeah, see, back in the 70s, there was a cotton shortage as well, actually. Very good. In the 70s, when that happened, though, there was a lot of synthetics, were the answer back in the 70s when that happened. Lots of synthetics. But anyway, bamboo is very soft, and the funny thing about it is it has a naturally occurring enzyme that eliminates odor. I'm not going to pretend to be the chemist that can explain the process of why that happens, but it's one of those funny little things that bamboo can do where it tends to be, it tends to absorb odor. It doesn't put out odor quite so much as plain cotton or sort of reflect it back like polyester does. But it's very ecologically friendly. This is a very green material. So there is a brand name called Big Bamboo. Big Bamboo is part of a bigger parent company, and I don't know the right way to pronounce it, but Cariloha or Cariloha, perhaps. I'm not sure the right way to say it, but Cariloha is the company that's sort of the big bamboo company. Now there's others that manufacture bamboo garments, but they're the big one. They're the one who, if you go on a cruise, and in the cruise in the ship's gift shop and at all the ports that you'll visit, all the gift shops, Cariloha is the brand whose bamboo shirts you're going to see everywhere. It's very lightweight. It's very breathable. Bamboo's a really fun material, especially in these days as it's actually come into its own. Again, 10 years ago, I think we were sort of just experimenting with it. These days, it's a whole bunch of different stuff. Um, wow, Frank, I had no idea bamboo can grow 36 inches in a day. I had no idea. How do you like that? So with bamboo, you do want to stick with a low temperature application. It's one of those where it's not going to melt, obviously, but scorching can occur, or it can cause the fibers, again, to turn just a smidge on the shiny side. So you do want to stick with the lower applying stuff when you do bamboo. So again, when we're talking about screen printing, the two lower applying transfers are ElastiPrints, the Plastisol, and an AquaTrue, the water-based. And then for digital, the three lower applying transfers are the Stretch Litho, the Express Matte 250, and the Soft Opaque. All right. And totally not the topic of the webinar, but for those not familiar, the Express Matte 250 is a matte print cut vinyl where we print your artwork onto the vinyl, cut it out. So the Express Matte 250 is a matte vinyl. Soft Opaque is, I don't want to call it glossy because it's not glossy, but it's not quite as matte as the Express Matte. Soft Opaque actually also has a nice stretch capacity to it as well. So either way, the point is you want to go with the lower applying transfers on the bamboo, Stretch Litho, Express Matte, and the Soft Opaque for the digital. The bottom three there, Cody, are the digital transfers. So the top two are screen print, the ElastiPrints and the AquaTrue. The bottom three are digital, so Stretch Litho, Express Matte, and Soft Opaque. All right, so the next one I have a whole bunch of different names for. So you're totally right, Kendrick. Yes, the first two, acrylic and bamboo, you want to use the same types of transfers. So the next one here we're talking about has a bunch of different names, and if you wanted to get really technical, is there a difference between burlap, hessian, and gunny cloth? Yes, technically there's a difference between each one, but in 2019, those three words are almost interchangeable for the most part. Burlap, gunny cloth, hessian, whatever you want to call it. I think part of it depends on where you come from in the country, too. I know folks in the South like to refer to it as gunny cloth. Up here in Ohio, I like to think of it as burlap. But either way, the point is this is a very tough material. This is a woven material that tends to be made out of jute, natural fibers, jute, natural fibers. The jute plant is more heavily used in our industry these days. Back in the 70s, jute was kind of a newer thing. You saw it only here and there. Today's day and age, there's a whole bunch of different jute stuff you can purchase. But so the point is that burlap, gunny cloth is a naturally occurring fiber. What you tend to see it the most in, these are potato sacks. In our industry, in the garment decoration industry, we usually see these being used as little decorative things. Weddings, if you have anybody who comes to you with wedding help, And they've got a country themed wedding or a farmyard themed wedding. I've seen a lot of gunny cloth totes used for these things. A friend of mine had a wedding and she did little drawstring tote bags for the takeaway at each person's seat. Um, so you tend to see these aren't things you're going to find garments. It's always going to be bags. It's going to be different size totes, little accent things. So these aren't things you're going to see a burlap t-shirt. That would be very uncomfortable. um, but the point is that it is a very rough cloth. That's the takeaway here. So technically, any type of transfer will work on these. Burlap, gunny cloth, Hessian, whatever you want to call it, any type of transfer will work. Because it's a naturally occurring fiber with that cellulose in it, and because it doesn't have a low application point, like it's not going to scorch, you can put anything on it. But you got to remember that this type of fabric is rough, and the transfer is going to pick up that texture of the fiber, right? So if you have a burlap tote bag that is a particularly rough weave of burlap, when you press that transfer on it, you got to remember that a screen printed transfer, for example, like goof proof, is going to want to melt into all the nooks and crannies. So technically, it could come off looking a little bit wavy, like a straight line isn't going to look like a straight line because the goof proof is melting into all the nooks and crannies of the burlap. So if you're going to press on burlap, you got to be careful. I tend to like to use the digital transfers. Personally, this is just me. I like to use the CAD prints because the CAD prints, it's not as distinct an effect when you press a CAD print onto burlap or the gunny cloth. Oh, well, there you go. Susan used glitter vinyl on her burlap when she decorated it. That's another good strategy, Susan. The vinyl product, like, see, this is why this is why I like the CAD print. But goof proof will work. Goof proof will work. If you have a burlap that is a lighter weave, it's not as heavy and it's not as rough, goof proof will perform fantastically. The screen print goof proof product will perform fantastically. It's only when you've got a real rough weave that you got to be careful. Next, we have canvas. So canvas is very similar to burlap. It's another naturally occurring, it's a woven fabric, so another heavy duty. The original intent for canvas was to be used for tents back in the day. Today we see it mostly in awnings and bags. Those tend to be the two big things I think we decorate canvas for, awnings and bags. So it's really the exact same rules as the burlap, to be totally honest with you. All of the different transfer types will apply. Canvas does not have a temperature we have to be worried about burning. So you're good to really use any transfer type you want. The heavier transfers, like the goof proof or the CAD prints, like I was talking about earlier, tend to be the ones that we say by default. Some canvas is very smooth. This day and age, when you're buying canvas tote bags, there are some canvas tote bags out there that are smooth as a baby's bottom, and you don't have to worry about that rough weave at all. But every now and again, you still come across a canvas bag that does have that gritty canvas feel to it. And when that's the case, you do want to make sure, again, that you're aware that the transfer is going to take on that gritty texture. Um, so again, I would stick with the goof proof if you want to do screen print. I tend to like to do CAD prints. When I make canvas totes, I tend to use the CAD prints. That's just me personally. Um, so that's just me. But and yes, we are recording the webinar today. So you will be able to find a recording of it at transferexpress.com/webinars. Now, please note too, you'll see in the picture here, this is totally not the topic of the webinar, but I'm going to throw it out there for those of you who are new to the industry. The canvas bag that we're applying in this picture, it has a pocket, and we're applying the transfer on the pocket. But you'll notice those two blue canvas straps that are in the way. When you go to heat press that, the heat press is going to hit those straps, and it's not going to hit the transfer evenly. So that little gray pad we have is called a print perfect pad. We slide that print perfect pad inside the pocket, and it raises the surface area above the blue straps. So when the heat press comes down, it hits the transfer, not the blue straps. And again, this is important because if the heat press does not squarely and flushly hit the transfer is not going to get proper pressure or heat. So important to think about when you're doing canvas tote bags. For whatever reason, canvas tote bags, they love to have seams in weird places. All right. The next fabric we're going to talk about is chiffon. Chiffon or crepe. Again, these are technically two things that have different meanings, but for the sake of this webinar, we're going to lump them together. On a technical level, chiffon crepe is a type of lace. At the end of the day, this is something that is a weave. So back in the day when chiffon was first created, chiffon was made out of silk. And it was just a certain way they wove the silk fibers together. It's a subtle twist that they give to the fibers during the weaving process that causes the chiffon to have kind of a rough texture. And I don't like to say that because it's not like sandpaper. If you've ever felt chiffon, you know it's not like rough, but it's not smooth. The twist that it gives during the weaving process kind of gives it a little bit of a texture. The point is, back in the day, it was originally silk. Chiffon saw a comeback, though, once people began to realize they could use polyester to weave chiffon. So today, you'll see a lot more polyester chiffon. But here's the point. We really don't recommend heat pressing on chiffon. Now, today, because of the synthetics that they can use, the polyesters and the different poly fabrics that can be used to make chiffon, it's not nearly as expensive as it was back in the 60s and the 70s. So grandma and grandpa certainly would not have ironed their chiffon in any capacity. If grandma had a chiffon blouse or a chiffon dress, she wouldn't have ironed that. But today it's a lot less dramatic. It's a little bit on the cheaper side than it used to be. But the point is, it's a very delicate fabric. That weave is very delicate, and when you heat press it, you compress the weave, and you'll ruin the chiffon. So now we're not saying not to press it because the transfers won't stick. In reality, virtually any transfer type will stick to a chiffon. The point is, when you heat press chiffon, you will ruin it. So you do not want to do that. But our marketing department did throw this one out. I actually didn't know this. We do have one customer that uses goof proof on chiffon material for a perfume display. Who knew? Again, it would come down to being careful there. And I suppose if you're not going to wash that, then sure, you could actually turn that pressure down and get that goof proof to come off the paper and stick to the chiffon without smushing it. But I wouldn't launder that. But again, you don't want to heat press on chiffon. You will ruin it. Cationic dyeable polyester. If you are a science nerd, this is cool stuff. So the quick nutshell version of this, because I'm talking way too much, is that cationic dyeable polyester is a garment that the garment has been charged, an ionic charge, and then the dye is given the opposite charge. So when the blank polyester is dyed, they bond on a much closer level because of the opposing charges. The opposites attract. So what happens basically is a cationic dyed polyester is going to be a very vibrant color. It's going to be very bright, and there's much less chance of bleeding. Now, notice I say much less. Cationic polyester, there are some places that will market it as it won't bleed, it won't bleed. Cationic polyester can bleed, actually, yes. You just got to be careful. It can be heat sensitive, and that's when the bleeding will happen. So you do want to be careful. You still want to use our 5 low applying transfer types. These are the same ones that we talked about for the bamboo and the acrylic. You want to stick to these low temperature applications. Now, with these low temperature applications, the cationic polyester will not bleed. It's when you get hotter that it starts to have bleeding problems. So again, screen print, we've got our Plastisol Elasti prints, we've got our water-based AquaTrue, and then for our digital transfers, we've got Stretch Litho, Express Matte 250, and Soft Opaque. Cationic dyeable polyester is becoming more common. If you guys get into the more expensive jerseys, a lot of different sports, when you get into the expensive jerseys, you start to see cationic polyester, or warm-up gear, the more expensive warm-up gear, you start to see the cationic stuff. So again, you can heat press on it. You just want to make sure you go with the heat-sensitive stuff. All right. So this is the one I mentioned during the intro, and I told you guys I would talk about later. Kona. This is one of those crazy things that people call us up and say, "Hey, I've got this garment. My customer brought it into my shop. They want me to put a transfer type on it. I've never heard of it before. What can I do?" So we went out and purchased some. We messed with it. We experimented with it, and we figured out what works on it. Kona, believe it or not, are you sitting down? Kona is a fabric that is made from processed woven coconut husks. How crazy is that? Somebody got real creative at the Orvis Corporation and they found a way to process coconut husks and weave them into what is essentially a very high-end type of fabric for high-end apparel. So Kona is another lightweight cotton alternative. I believe that's when Orvis Corporation started to develop Kona, was during the cotton shortage, actually, several years back. So the whole point is it's, again, a lighter weight. Who sells that? You know what, Kathy? You would have to do a Google search for it. Kona is not very common. You don't see it all over the place, but there are a couple authorized wholesalers out there. Um, but it's a lightweight fabric. It is very soft. But what's important is just like the bamboo, it doesn't hold odors and it doesn't fade. So Kona, it's a really unique fabric. It's very different. But again, it's going to be more for the high-end stuff. These are for the people that have a little bit more cash to spend. They want something fancy. If you've got a customer who walks into your shop and they're looking for something different, this is a great option. But recommended transfer types, any. The Kona doesn't, it's not heat sensitive. You don't have to worry about melting or burning or singeing. So the Kona you can totally run with any of our transfer types. Cordura. Cordura. So Cordura was a brainchild of the DuPont brand, the DuPont family of companies. If you want to compare Cordura to something, it's just like nylon. Cordura was actually one of DuPont's nylon alternatives, if you want to look at it that way. Back when Cordura came out, it was viewed as a miracle fabric. It was so strong and so durable. Today, Cordura is used in high-end backpacks, bags, and workwear. Cordura is incredibly durable. It is a very tough fabric, actually. Um, but again, it's a lot like nylon. It has the same features of nylon. So what that means is you have a limited list of transfer types that apply to it. The two types of transfers that apply to nylon: if you've got screen print, you want to go with our AquaTrue. If you want digital, you need to go with soft opaque. So again, it's not that you have to worry about burning this fabric. It's not that you have to worry about melting it. It's that because Cordura is a relative of nylon, there's only certain adhesives that will stick to it. So that's why you want to go with the AquaTrue and you want to go with the soft opaque. Okay. Now, Cordura is not something you're going to be asked to decorate very often. Again, it's very high end. A lot of Cordura you see tends to be stuff that people don't always necessarily decorate anyway, in all honesty. But when it does walk into your shop, when somebody does need Cordura decorated, make sure you stick with something that works on nylon. So the AquaTrue and the soft opaque. Dazzle. So Dazzle is another one of those fabrics that's not actually its own magical kind of fabric. Dazzle refers to a type of weave. The most important question here when you are doing Dazzle, and again, you tend to see these in uniforms, football uniforms, I think, for the most part. I've seen Dazzle cloth used at a couple other things too, but it tends to be mostly football. In the picture you see, we've got a ladies' powder puff football jersey, but the point is, when you are using Dazzle, you have to look if it's polyester Dazzle or nylon Dazzle. Because just like we just talked about on the last slide, if you have nylon, a family member in the nylon family, there are only certain types of adhesives that work on that. Okay, so when you have Dazzle cloth, make sure you look if it's poly Dazzle or nylon Dazzle. So now the pluses to Dazzle, again, it's a type of weave, so it's not its own fabric. It's actually a way that polyester fibers are woven or nylon fibers are woven to give it sort of a shiny effect. But one of the pluses is because of how tight the Dazzle weave is, stains. It doesn't tend to be a stain fabric. It tends to block stains. It also holds its shape very nicely. Doesn't wrinkle real easily, and it's hard to rip and tear. This is why you see football jerseys made out of Dazzle, backpacks, that kind of stuff. So now the important part, if you have polyester Dazzle, you can literally apply any transfer type to it. Polyester Dazzle is super versatile. You can use any transfer type. You can do virtually anything you want with polyester Dazzle. If you have nylon Dazzle, you have to use the two products that work on nylon: soft opaque for the digital, aqua true for screen print. All right. So nylon Dazzle, you use soft opaque if you're using a digital transfer, or aqua true if you want a screen printed transfer. Fleece. So I want to throw this out. Before we go over the information on the slide, I do want to put a disclaimer out here. When we say fleece, we are not referring to that brand that we've all seen out there called Polar Fleece. I'm actually wearing a Polar Fleece vest today. Polar Fleece is a different thing altogether. Polar Fleece is actually a brand, and it's a whole separate thing. Okay, so when we talk about fleece, we're actually talking about cotton or polyester fleece or 50-50 blend fleece. So fleece is essentially that fabric that is, and we've all seen it before. We've all worn it. You probably have a fleece sweater in your closet at home, I imagine, or a fleece scarf or something to that effect. So fleece is that home fabric where it's very smooth on the outside, very easy for us to decorate. God bless fleece. And then on the inside, it tends to be a high pile. Now, when you hear the word pile, pile tends to refer to the density of a fabric. So when you hear somebody say high pile, whether you're talking about fabric or carpeting, when you hear somebody say high pile, that means a high density, bigger fibers, thicker fibers. So fleece tends to be soft on the outside and then a deep pile, a thick pile fabric on the inside. So fleece can be made out of cotton, polyester, or blends. Actually, and today, you see fleece that's actually made out of a couple different blends. So the point is, when you're dealing with fleece, this is another one of those things where when customers call us at Transfer Express, we ask them, hey, what are you putting your transfers on? They tell us fleece. That word doesn't really give us enough information. You got to tell me what the fleece is made out of. 15 years ago, totally wouldn't have been a thing. there was one way to make fleece. Today, it's a much different situation. So, point is, regardless, unless you've got a fleece that has something really weird mixed into it, most fleeces you can apply virtually any transfer type to. We don't tend to have issues with these. I have yet to see one that is that heat sensitive that you've got to be paranoid about it. So when you're dealing with fleece, even if it's a polyester fleece, you don't have to worry about heat sensitivity. The fleece you can apply virtually any transfer type to without a problem. Goretex. Goretex. So Goretex is actually a brand name. Goretex is something else that was developed, I believe it was the 1950s or the 1960s. It was a fabric that was meant to be another nylon alternative. The point of Goretex was to be a nylon alternative that was very tough. They wanted a really tough fabric, something you could beat the heck out of. So today, Goretex tends to be outdoor wear, stuff like coats and gloves. Goretex is serious stuff. Tends to be, I have yet to ever see something cheap from Goretex. Goretex tends to be very expensive stuff. So when you're doing Goretex, because it is part of the nylon family, you do want to use our two nylon products: AquaTrue for screen print, Soft Opaque for digital. So Goretex, totally, you can apply on it, you can decorate it, not a problem. But again, it is part of the nylon family. It's kind of it's a distant cousin once removed from nylon. Cody's got a good question. This isn't windbreaker material then, right? No, Cody. You know what? Actually, I bet you $1, Cody. If you were to go to Goretex's website, they probably do sell a windbreaker, but most stereotypical windbreakers, Cody, are not going to be made out of Goretex. I promise you. most stereotypical windbreakers are going to be made out of nylon, polyester, or a combo of the two. Goretex is hardcore stuff. Kendrick, yes, Goretex. You know what? I didn't know it was bulletproof, but I believe Goretex is actually fireproof. There's a type of fireproof Goretex or something to that effect. Goretex is hardcore stuff. Cardiologist used Goretex patch on my husband's heart. Wow, Julie, see, it's like I said, Goretex is intense. Um, oh, Nomex. Thank you, John Kelly. Yes, Nomex is the fireproof stuff. Thank you. The X threw me off. Sorry about that. But Goretex, very durable, very hardcore. It's going to be expensive. Make sure you stick with the nylon stuff. So AquaTrue for screen print, soft opaque for digital. Jacquard. Jacquard. So if you've seen this word before, it is not Jacquard. It is Jacquard. Think of it as a hard K sound, Jacquard. So Jacquard is another one of those things where it's not a magical separate type of fabric. Jacquard is a type of weave. So Jacquard is Jacquard can actually be a weave or a knit, to be totally honest with you. This is one that can go either way. Either way, Jacquard is generally it refers more to the texture in total honesty. A Jacquard garment has a certain texture to it that the weave or the knit tends to accomplish, I don't want to say bumpy, but there's a texture to it. It doesn't feel completely smooth. We're not talking rough like canvas or like burlap, but Jacquard has a texture to it. This is another one, though, where you have to be cognizant of what your Jacquard is woven or knit out of. So you always want to look at the tag or the byline in the catalog when you're ordering Jacquard. Look and see what it's made out of. Now, the reason I say this is because if you've got a cotton or a cotton poly blend, you're good to go. You can use anything you want. Cotton or cotton poly blend, you can use anything on Jacquard. But if you have a performance wear Jacquard or there's certain types of Jacquard garments that do tend to be a heat sensitive polyester. Again, the types of Jacquard polo shirts that have do not iron on the tag, those are the ones you got to be careful of. And in that case, you want to make sure to use something that that our heat sensitive transfers will support. So again, Elastiprints and Express Matte 250, those are the two coolest applying transfers. So Elastiprints for screen print products, Express Matte 250 for digital products. Linen. Linen. So linen is another one of those fabrics that is very high end. Linen is very expensive. For those of you who like trivia, linen is made out of flax, the flax fibers. So linen is very prized because it's a very loose weave. Linen is one of those weaves where you don't want to snag a linen garment on something, linen pants or a linen blouse or a linen button up. You don't want to snag it because the weave is very loose and it's going to be very easy for it to come unwoven or to yank fibers out of it. But the hitch is because it is that loose weave, it is incredibly breathable and cool. If you've ever worn a linen garment, linen is one of those things. It's real nice, especially if you live in a hotter climate. But the catch is linen, because it is flax based and because that weave is very sensitive, you do want to use our heat sensitive fabrics, or rather, I'm sorry, our heat sensitive transfers on linen. So again, for the screen print, you want to use the Elastiprint. That's our plastisol based screen printing, or you want to use AquaTrue, which is the water based. And then for digital, you want to use either the Stretch Litho, the Express Matte 250, or the Soft Opaque. So linen, when we decorate linen, and has anybody out there, have any of you guys out there decorated linen before? I tend to find that when people ask us about linen in terms of transfers, it tends to be for tablecloths, napkins, that kind of thing. I recently spoke to a customer who's doing linen napkins for again for a wedding. So linen tends to be something that you don't tend to decorate a heck of a lot. When you do, it's usually not garments. It usually tends to be accessories and that kind of stuff. But sounds like nobody out there has done too much with linen, huh? So we'll go ahead and move on to the next one then. Next one is Lycra Spandex Elastane. So again, this is one of those situations where these three words technically on some level, they are different. But for the intents and purposes of our industry, the decoration industry, we can really treat Lycra, Spandex, and elastane all the same way. They're all the same thing. Lycra, Spandex, and elastane are all super stretchy fabrics. Super stretchy fabrics. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the difference, there is polyester performance wear out there that tends to be stretchy. Polyester performance wear is just worn close to the skin. Lycra or spandex or elastane, those types of garments are actually meant to be worn not just tight to the skin, they're actually sucking up against the skin. So polyester performance wear is just meant to be close to the skin. Lycra, spandex, elastane, this is the stuff that squeezes you. This is the stuff that turns you into a sausage casing, right? um, so Lycra, Spandex, and elastane are technically brand names. They're all very stretchy. They're all very stain resistant. This is again because of the weave that's used. Water resistant, water wicking. These are the types of fabrics that water just kind of beads up. Gym leggings, Freddie, yes. You do see a lot of spandex and Lycra gym leggings. Elastane, you don't see a lot of elastane out there in general, but yes, leggings are usually Lycra and spandex. Not all the time, though, Freddie. You want to check your tags on those, but most of the time, yeah. Now, because of the stretchiness here, you have to be careful. This is one of those where you could take a Lycra fabric and you could totally put a goof-proof transfer on it, but it will crack to pieces as soon as somebody puts it on. And because it's meant to stretch, because that's the point of these fabrics, the goof-proof is not going to last. It's going to break apart, and it's going to break apart so badly that it's going to flake off. So it's not that goof-proof won't initially adhere, it's that it cannot stand the stretchiness. So you want to stick with our stretchy transfers. Now, I know we have our ElastiPrint. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's going, Andy, you've talked about ElastiPrint. Why is it not on this list? Because spandex, Lycra, and elastane are so stretchy that the ElastiPrint can't take it. It's not stretchy enough for the ElastiPrint's not stretchy enough to go on this stuff. So you want to stick with our two most stretchy transfer types, AquaTrue and Soft Opaque. So the AquaTrue, again, is our screen print water-based product. The Soft Opaque is a digital vinyl-based product. Hey, I'm glad you find it helpful, Kendrick. All right. Nylon. Dun dun dun. So many years ago, nylon was almost a swear word at Transfer Express. Nylon is one of those fibers that, because of the way nylon polymers are formulated, nylon is just it doesn't like all adhesives. So nylon is a synthetic fiber, very popular for outdoor wear, outdoor materials. Nylon tends to be the whole family. I mean, we talked about Goretex and Cordura, part of the nylon family. Nylon fibers just are durable fibers for the most part. Ripstop nylon actually is a great example. Has anybody out there heard of Ripstop? Ripstop is actually it's a plain nylon, but Ripstop is woven in such a way that you cannot tear it, or you got to be Hulk Hogan to tear it, or you got to have a knife to tear it. But Ripstop is actually what they make parachutes out of. So very cool stuff. All your trivia today. Anyway, again, nylon is just because of the way it's formulated. It's very non-stick. Stuff does not like to stick to nylon. Now there are customers out there. I'm sure there's somebody out there who would tell me that, hey, I've put goof-proof on nylon before. Your regular goof-proof transfers. Every now and then we have a customer tell us they got goof-proof to work on nylon. And if that's you, if you did get it to work once, more power to you. But because goof-proof does not consistently work on all types of nylon, we cannot officially sanction that. So if you do choose to use it, go for it. But just be aware that Transfer Express, we can't support that because goof-proof does not stick to all types of nylon. There's a lot of different types of nylon out there. We've talked about the Goretex and the Cordura. While those aren't types of nylon, they're part of that family. There are actually different weaves of nylon that have different names, different brand names usually. But the point is, goof-proof won't stick to all of them. So you want to stick to the AquaTrue, the water-based screen print, or Soft Opaque, which is our digital product. The Soft Opaque and the AquaTrue stick to virtually anything under the sun, including nylon. Neoprene. Neoprene. So neoprene is technically a synthetic foam. Neoprene, again, if you're a nerd, if you're a heat press nerd like I am, neoprene is cool because even though it's a foam and most of those squishy foamy materials, the heat press likes to destroy or melt or warp them in some capacity, it does not do that to neoprene. How cool is that? So neoprene, you tend to see the laptop covers or wetsuits or can coolers. I'm sure everybody at home somewhere has a can cooler or a koozie made out of neoprene, right? So neoprene, it's a very squishy, foamy material, and virtually any type of transfer works on it. The only thing you want to keep in mind with neoprene, and I always throw this out there when people ask about neoprene, the only thing you want to think about is make sure that whatever you're about to heat press with the neoprene, make sure it lays flat. Yes, they are, Freddie. They're popsicle holders. How cool is that? um, but neoprene, you want to make sure whatever you're about to press on sits flat. And I say this because there are can coolers out there made of neoprene that are pre-formed to be cylindrical, and they don't sit flat. They don't lay flat. Those you're going to have a real hard time heat pressing on. You'll actually ruin them. So you want to make sure when you do heat press on neoprene, you want to make sure it's something made of neoprene that sits flat. Or they make can coolers where the bottoms pop out and they sort of fold down on themselves. Those are easily heat pressable too. PK, PK. So again, there will be a spelling test, folks. PK. Uh, so PK is another one of those things where it's not a separate type of fabric. It is a type of weave. PK is a rough weave. It's not as rough as burlap usually, although I have seen some PK polo shirts that, oh boy, they are very, very rough in terms of the weave. PK tends to be made for polo shirts. You do see bags every now and then, but the point of PK is that unlike the other woven polo shirts that you'll see, like we talked about the Jacquard earlier, we're going to talk about Oxford and poplin in a minute here. PK is the rough cousin of all these. So now anything will stick to PK. Goof proof, hot split, any of our screen print stuff, any of our digital stuff. But what you need to remember is when you have a roughly woven fiber like this, where it creates kind of a waffle texture, and I hate to say that because it's not a waffle weave, but for the sake of giving you guys a visual, PK has that nooks and crannies texture. When you press a goof-proof transfer, it's going to take on that texture a little bit. Now, if your PK is not really rough, if it's sort of just textured but mostly smooth, then you're fine. It's not a big deal. But if you get a PK that is particularly rough, again, the screen print transfers are going to melt into all the nooks and crannies, and it's going to give it a little bit of a textured look. So if your customer is concerned about that, if you're concerned about that, you want to make sure to use a digital transfer, one of the CAD prints, for example, or even the stretch litho. Oh, Laura Lee, very good point. Think soft burlap. Laura Lee's completely right. That's a good way of looking at it. I don't think it's quite as rough as burlap, but it's that same thing where it's a real rough weave like that. So very good, Laura Lee. Pelon, Pelon. Um, so Pelon is one of those fun things that not everybody's aware of Pelon unless you're an embroiderer. Uh, Pelon is made from polyester fibers. Pelon's actually cool because it's not woven or knit. Pelon is a compressed fabric, believe it or not. It's the craziest thing. If you want to look at a real neat process, look at how they make Pelon. Basically, it's taking a whole bunch of polyester fibers and smushing them down into a sheet. So Pelon is super cheap. You can get it at allstitch.net. You can get it at a lot of places, but that's where we suggest getting your Pelon from. You'll see Pelon used in embroidery, for example. If you're gonna, and I'm sure there's embroiderers in our audience right now who can explain it better than I can, but the idea is Pelon gives you structure. If you're embroidering onto a fabric that is very thin and very flexible, you want to use something to give it some structure to make it more solid before you embroider on it, and that's what Pelon is used for. There you go, Susan. Use it all the time in my embroidery. Exactly. Now, Pelon is useful, exactly, backing for your embroidery. Pelon is useful in our industry for testing. If you ever need to test a transfer or just futz with the transfer, mess with it on your heat press, play with it, get it to, or even if you're new to the industry, if you're an embroiderer and you're buying your heat press and using it for the first time, bust out some sheets of Pelon. We actually use Pelon for testing purposes here at Transfer Express. And if you own our color selector, our Transfer Express color selector is made from Pelon. How do you like that? And just for the sake of putting it out there, you can apply virtually anything to Pelon. While it's made out of polyester, you don't have to worry about melting it or scorching it. That's what makes it so much fun to test on. Oxford. Oxford. So we're adding Oxford to our list of weave types. It is a type of weave. It is not its own magical type of fabric. It can be made of cotton, polyester, nylon, blends of all those different. Oxford is one of those things where you find tons of different kinds of Oxford. The way to look at Oxford is that it's kind of like a basket weave. That's what makes it different than the other weave types. Oxford is like a basket weave. Kind of gives it a sheen. If you have an Oxford shirt at home, you know that the look of it when you catch it in the light is just a little bit different than PK. PK doesn't have a shine to it. Oxford does. But when you're doing Oxford, it's another one of those where check the tag. Check the tag. The word Oxford by itself means nothing. You got to find out if it's made out of cotton, poly, nylon, a blend of several different things. Pay attention. Remember that if you have nylon in your Oxford, you need to use certain transfer types. But for the most part, you're going to find Oxford is cotton and polyester. You do not see a lot of nylon mixed in with Oxford. So as long as you have cotton, polyester, Oxford, any type of transfer will work on it. Polypropylene. Polypropylene. All right, show of hands, everybody. Polypropylene. Who has melted polypropylene to their heat press? Who's melted polypropylene? Anybody? I will fully admit. Me. Janice, not yet. Janice hasn't melted polypropylene to her heat press, guys. Janice is the only one. I think we've all melted polypropylene at one point in time, right? Oh, no, Helen too. Okay. I did it. I admit it. Polypropylene, when it was still brand new on our market, we hadn't really heard about it yet here at Transfer Express. We had a customer walk into our showroom and hand me a polypropylene bag. I'd never heard of it before. I assumed it was just a kind of polyester. Stuck it on a heat press, hit it at 365, lifted the press, and oh my God, the bag is gone. No, it's not gone. It just melted to the press. Oh, John, lovely smell. Yes. Oh God, the smell of melted polypropylene is terrible. Terrible. So here's the deal. I joke about melting polypropylene. It's a type of plastic polymer. It's very heat sensitive, but you can heat press on polypropylene. It is very possible. The reason this is important, guys, is because polypropylene is very cost effective. Very, very cost effective. Polypropylene bags tend to be very cheap to purchase in bulk. So polypropylene is a great thing for you to have when customers want to do cheap tote bags like you see in my picture here. Yoga mats also, you can find polypropylene in yoga mats. But make sure you use one of our heat sensitive transfer types. So our suggestion, the best ones for polypropylene because of its melt temperature. The melt temperature is usually around 300 degrees, give or take, give or take. You want to make sure the transfer applies under 300 degrees. So you're going to want to stick to our ElastiPrint and AquaTrue for the screen print, and then the Stretch Litho and Express Matte 250 for the digital. And good luck when you do your first polypropylene bags. Make sure you turn that temperature down. Under 300 degrees, take it from me. Poplin. Poplin. So poplin is a fabric originally, believe it or not, poplin originally was called papelin and was made many eons ago for the Pope. That's where it gets its name from, actually, poplin. Poplin can be made out of a bunch of different fabrics. It is, again, a type of weave. So the weave for poplin is not a basket weave like the Oxford we just talked about. The weave for a poplin is actually a crisscross pattern. It makes it very breathable. It's a sort of an open pattern, so it's a very nice airflow to it. But you need to be careful because poplin can be a little bit high end, and can contain silk or rayon. We're about to talk about rayon in a second here. Um, Silk and rayon are both very heat sensitive. So when it comes to poplin, you need to be careful if you're using a cotton or a polyester poplin, or if you're using a silk or rayon poplin. So if you've got a cotton polypoplin, anything works on it. Have fun, use whatever transfer type you want. If you're using a silk mixture or a rayon poplin, and they're not going to be 100%. It's going to be like rayon that's mixed with cotton and poly, or silk that's mixed with cotton or polyester. But either way, if you have any silk or rayon, stick to the heat sensitive stuff. The Elastiprints, the AquaTrue, the 2 screen printed products, or the Express Matte 250 for a digital. And Robert's correct. It also is sort of a rough texture weave. Poplin's not silky smooth. It's got a little bit of a texture to it too. Yeah. Rayon. So rayon's another fabric that saw invented many years ago, but saw another boom years back when we had our cotton shortage. Rayon became very big again. Rayon is called a semi-synthetic because technically it's almost naturally occurring, but not quite. Rayon needs a little bit of a synthetic approach during the manufacturing process to become what it is, but it's almost a naturally occurring fiber. You can also see it if you ever heard of viscose. Has anyone seen a viscose garment? Viscose and rayon are the exact same thing. I believe it's a difference of brands. So the hitch here is rayon is heat sensitive. Okay. In today's day and age, you'll see a lot of tri mixtures, three mixtures where you see cotton, poly, and rayon all mixed together. The garment industry has done that because it makes a very soft garment. When you see that, that is also heat sensitive. So anytime you see rayon, you need to be careful. Rayon is heat sensitive, so you want to stick to the heat sensitive transfer types. That's Elastiprints and AquaTrue for screen print, Stretch Litho, Express Matte 250, and Soft Opaque for the digital. Very soft though, very soft. If you've ever had a 100% rayon or 100% viscose garment, it's like wearing gauze. So great fabric, just got to be careful you don't want to melt it. All right, satin and sateen. Satin and sateen, again, same thing. These are the same thing. They are a weave, not a special type of fabric. They are very shiny. So the weave in this case, when you're using silk or polyester or nylon to make satin and sateen, it's a certain way that they spin the weave. They spin the fibers as it's being woven that causes it to have that reflective quality to it. Very heat sensitive though. So again, if you have a silk, satin, or sateen, you don't want to heat press on it. If you have 100% silk anything, whether it's 100% silk satin or 100% silk in general, don't heat press on silk. You don't want to do that. If you've got a polyester satin or a nylon satin, then you just follow the rules for polyester or nylon. So again, the 2 nylon products that we have are the AquaTrue and the Soft Opaque. Or polyester, you can press on just the heat sensitive stuff. So the Elastiprints, the AquaTrue, the Express Matte 250, and so on and so forth. Slub. Slub. How do you like that name? So slub is a type of fabric. You see this here and there. It's more recent, last couple years. There's a couple different manufacturers out there, like I believe Alternative, Canvas, I think also, District Made, I think might. There's a couple different manufacturers out there that have slub fabric. And what slub is essentially you're taking a cotton or a polyester or a mixture 50-50, and it's again a woven process where they're twisting the fibers as they're weaving them. But unlike some of the other weaves we've talked about, the twists are very violent. It's a very strong twist during the weaving process. To us as decorators, it just means that it's textured. So you'll have a slub garment that you run your hand over the inside of it and you go, oh my God, it's bumpy in there. It's just that's the effect of the slub. That's the effect of the weave. It's kind of a fashion thing. It gives the shirt a different look. If you look closely at the colors of a slub garment, that's what that twisting of the fibers does. gives it that texture, gives it a different look. It's kind of a trendy thing. It hasn't been around that long. It's typically very lightweight. So especially the three garments you see pictured here, they are hoodies technically, but these are the types of hoodies that are virtually gauzy, very lightweight hoodies. So slub is a very trendy fabric. But you don't tend to have to worry about it. Slub is one of those where it's cotton polyester. It's not made out of anything too sensitive, so you can use virtually anything on the slub. Terry cloth. So terry cloth is a woven cotton or a cotton poly blend. We all have terry cloth at home, your dish towels, your bath towels. It's a high pile of looped fibers. When you go home tonight, take a close look at your terry cloth and you'll find out it's loops. It's loops of fibers. It's a really neat weaving process. You can bring up YouTube videos and see how terry cloth is woven, again, if you're a garment nerd like I am. Terry cloth is a very high pile though. So here's the note. You can apply any type of transfer to terry cloth. You need to be super, super careful though, because the transfer is going to mat down those loops. So you don't want to use the thin transfers. Like can you put a hot split transfer on terry cloth? Yes, technically you can. But honestly, since you're matting down those loops, the smarter thing is to go with the heavier transfers, the goof proof, for example. Goof proof is the best bet in my personal opinion, but officially, technically, any of them will work. Twill. So twill is one of those things we've all seen, we've all played with. If you're a customer of Stalls ID Direct, you've probably even sewn some twill. So twill is a type of weave used on cotton or polyester fibers. Twill, as we all know, is kind of it's like ridges. It's almost like an up and down type thing. It's not rough in the same way that burlap is rough. Twill is very distinct lines, sort of kind of is the way to look at it. Twill is found in the making process, the manufacturing process of chino pants, tweed jackets, denim. In our industry, we tend to see it in caps. We've all played with twill caps, right? So the good news is anything works on twill, anything will stick to twill. Again, because it's got those ridges, it's not rough in the same way that burlap is rough, but because it has those ridges, you want to remember that it's going to take on the texture. The fabric is going to take on that texture. So you want to make sure when you use a screen printed transfer type like goof proof, it's going to want to soak into those ridges. So it's going to have a little bit of a blurred texture when you look at it closely. If you look at our picture here, the photograph on the slide is white goof on a twill hat. You notice that in this picture, it does not look blurry at all. If you were to take that hat and look at it super close up, you would notice it's a little bit on the blurry side because it's melted into those nooks and crannies. But remember that people aren't going to be running up to you on the street looking at your hat that closely generally. Wool. So we all know what wool is, right? Technically, if you look at the definition of wool, wool is naturally occurring animal fiber that can come from sheep, lambs, rabbits, that kind of stuff. Although the different types of wool these days, they all have their own terms, like rabbit wool is Angora, for example. But wool is very high quality. It's naturally occurring. In our industry, in the garment decoration industry, we see we see wool used in hats, socks, blankets, coats, anything to keep warm. Whether it's Angora wool or sheep's wool or whatever, wool has that naturally reflective quality with heat where it reflects the heat back at the wearer. That's the beauty of wool. The good news is wool is easy to decorate as long as the wool itself is not textured. If you've got super fluffy, fibery wool, this is a different story. But like the hat that we have pictured here, this is a wool hat, but the outside of it is nicely flat and smooth, easy to decorate on. So again, any type of transfer, also from a woolly mammoth. You know what, Alan? If you can find woolly mammoth wool at this point in time, then more power to you. But again, virtually anything works on it. So, whoo boy, we have gotten through a lot of fabrics, guys, and I'm over on time. I am so sorry. Don't get mad at me. So the couple other things I want to go over with you before we conclude this webinar. we have a transfer selector tool. If you have a hard time picking, well, okay, Andy, that was great information, but I'm still confused when to use goof-proof or hot split or any of that stuff. Hit our website, blog.transferexpress.com/transfer selector tool. The links are all over transferexpress.com. Our transfer selector tool is an interactive tool that will ask you questions that as you answer the questions, you will figure out what type of transfer to use on your project. So the transfer selector tools, fantastic gizmo on our blog at transferexpress.com. So definitely check out our transfer selector tool. Very super useful. And so if any of the information that we've gone over today is useful and you want to do some more reading, we've got a book, The Heat Printer's Ultimate Guide to Fabric Types. You can download it for free at transferexpress.com/ultimate guide fabric types. So basically the book is the webinar that we went over today. Even more stuff. The book has a lot more than we've even talked about, to be honest with you. Great photographs of each type of fabric. Apparel and decoration information, and I wrote the book, so go download it and enjoy it, if for no other reason than because I'm asking nicely. But check it out. The book is meant to be a great tool for you guys. It was originally a tool for our customer service reps here at Transfer Express. I made it many years ago as a tool for the reps to figure out what to suggest to you guys when you called us, and and it just became so useful that we figured, wait a minute, why not give it to you guys? So check it out. Good stuff. You don't want my autograph, I promise. All right. So the next webinar, we are going to focus. I forget, one of you guys made the comment that our information on Lycra and Spandex was useful. So you might want to write this one down. The next webinar is June 13th, and it will be tips for printing on nylon, spandex, and Lycra. We're going to focus on those fabric types specifically. They are huge in our industry right now. 15 years ago, this wasn't such a big thing, but today, nylon, Lycra, and spandex, you find it all over the place, all over the place. So we want to spend a webinar focusing just on decoration of those fabrics. So make sure, just for you, Evelyn. So make sure to join us on June 13th at 2 p.m. and we will do this again, same time, same place, right? All right. So thank you all for attending. I am so sorry that I went 10 minutes over. I know this was a little bit long, but I hope you got some good information. I hope everybody learned something. If you have any questions, if you want a copy of slides or you want to talk to us, shoot us an email, info@transferexpress.com. Check out our blog. Our marketing department does a fabulous job of putting out great information, infographics, and cool bits of information. blog.transferexpress.com. Watch our other webinars and this recording where it will be posted at transferexpress.com/webinars. And feel free to give us a call as well. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. I appreciate all of your input, and you were a very interactive crowd. I appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your Thursday.